On today's episode of Locked On Lightning, we're continuing our player reviews, and on today's episode, we're talking about Matt Dumba.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Danker. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Locked On Lightning. On today's episode, we're talking about Matt Dumba, his very brief stint in Tampa Bay. Will he be back next season, as well as expectations, as always, for next season? But before we grab any of those topics, we're talking about today's sponsor real quick, and today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Hockey GM. Have you ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? Well, now you can with Ultimate Hockey GM. It's completely free, and Locked On listeners get a free 100% boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in the game store. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Hockey GM. Start your dynasty now. So on today's episode, we're continuing our player reviews. And on today's episode, we're taking a look at the very brief sample size that was Matt Dumba's little stint, I guess if you want to call it, in Tampa Bay. If you remember, we actually did a segment also in our player reviews on Anthony Duclair. As you might remember, he also came into Tampa around pretty much the same time, within days of Matt Dumba did as well. So if you want to go back and check that out, I would highly recommend it. So on Matt Dumba real quick, I mean, listen, there's really not a lot to say about how he played in Tampa Bay this year. I will say for one thing, I mean, you know, those first couple of games that we had to see him play in Tampa Bay, and a lot of Lightning fans probably have heard the name Matt Dumba and have probably seen him maybe twice a year, obviously, when the Lightning played Minnesota and when they played Arizona. Well, mostly Minnesota, because I think really the Lightning only played one game against Arizona up until that point, if I remember correctly. But really, when talking about Matt Dumba, it was a good move at the time. You saw right away he kind of, you know, as with really any trade that you see at the trade deadline, he injected a lot of new energy and life into this team that really, quite frankly, they were lacking at that point in time. And I really think that, you know, his presence in terms of a leadership role, it was really nice to have that 100%. I mean, whenever you could get a guy in the dressing room at that point in the season to get to be there and who has had a long career like Matt Dumba, like we talked about on the Anthony Duclair episode, like a guy like that as well, I think it always adds a plus. You know, there's always a saying, or a lot of people say really that, you know, maybe sometimes it's a bad thing to have too many leaders in the clubhouse or in the locker room or whatever. And I don't think that really is the case when it comes to hockey. I think for the most part, the more leaders you have, the better off you are, because, you know, it kind of guarantees that you're going to be able to have enough guys that are going to say, listen, let's get on the right track. And the younger guys are always, regardless in hockey, when it comes to hockey culture in general, are always going to jump on board with whatever the leaders in the locker room and dressing room are going to do and how they're going to carry themselves. And so, you know, that was a very good trade in terms of that. If, you know, obviously, like I said, at that point in time, I have never had a problem, even at the deadline, adding more leadership. We see it every year with the Lightning, as over the last 5 years, how many players with a ton of NHL experience that they've brought in have really helped them, whether it just be having someone that has been there before or whatever, you know. So I don't have a problem with it at all. As for the trade, if you just to refresh your memory, so back on March 8th, the Lightning traded a 2027 fifth-round pick for Matt Dumba. His contract, yes, a little pricey, $3.9 million for the rest of the season. So yeah, that and they also got a 2025 seventh-round pick, which obviously, as we all remember now, that's Utah, not Arizona. So, you know, as to what that could be worth next season, a 7th-round pick, it regardless of if it's early in the round or not, chances are it's going to be an early round pick given, Utah. I don't think they're going to have a massive turnaround from what they were in Arizona as to what they are now in Utah. I mean, we'll see. I mean, who knows? New ownership, new environment. We'll see. But at the time, and given what might potentially happen, you're getting a guy for basically 18 games to kind of be a leader. Say, you know what? If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But guess what? We get a draft pick early in the 7th round. And I look at it this way. The Lightning are always going to, I feel like for at least the time being, while they're trying to win cups, they're always going to try and give away early draft picks. That's just, unfortunately the way it is. I don't particularly like it. Yes, it has worked in years past with certain players that the Lightning have picked up, and that's phenomenal. But at the same time, it's not something that I think really is a long-term successful thing. But as for Matt Dumba, I think that when we look back on his season, I think that really what it comes down to is that, you kind of were looking to add a veteran leader, and that's pretty much what it was. If you look at his games and his stats in Tampa Bay, it really wasn't much to really go home and scream and yell about and say that the Lightning really won that trade because of his performance. 18 games, 2 points, plus minus of -5. Unfortunately, the thing that when I think about Matt Dumba this year, in his brief stint, 18 games as well as the playoffs, the thing that really disappointed me watching him play, and this is me who I didn't really have any expectations of him just because I haven't seen a whole lot of Matt Dumba. This is a Lightning podcast. We don't really pay attention to the Western Conference that whole much, but from what I see out of Matt Dumba this year in Tampa Bay was that his inability to really do anything else other than hit. Some of those in the hockey world might think differently. But when it comes down to it, he was just a liability with the puck in general. He gave up a lot of he had a lot of giveaways in the neutral zone. He just, he had some moments where he made good physical plays, but other than that, that was really what he was limited to. And that's in today's NHL, that's not good enough. You're seeing it everywhere. You're seeing it on the defensive side of things and the offensive side of things. And I've talked about it quite a bit here on the podcast when we're doing player reviews, is that, the time and the days of players strictly being scorers or strictly being physical, that's not going to fly anymore in today's NHL. That has just drastically gotten faster, and the players have gotten bigger, and the scoring has gone through the roof in recent years. And eventually we'll get a return with just the goaltending in terms of that, because I think that the goaltending, a lot of goaltenders, I mean, you look at a guy like Vasilevsky, he's giving up a lot of goals, but I mean, that's a whole nother podcast that we could talk about. But with Matt Dumba, yeah, he was really a liability, and I think that really hurt the Lightning at times, and it kind of anytime, and I'm sure there were some Lightning fans that agree with me in this respect, but when you looked at Matt Dumba hold the puck, regardless of where it was on the ice, you almost had to wince whenever a player either skated by him, tried to engage him, or whatever the case may be, or whenever he tried to make a pass, you always had to hold your breath because you didn't know if he was going to turn it over or not. So if I had to grade his season with the Lightning, 18 games, not overly impressive, but also not a full season with the Lightning, I'm going to have to give him a C-, because the only reason I don't give him a D is because he didn't play nearly enough games. I don't really care at the end of the day what he did in Arizona. I don't. I really don't. And I think really all I care about is what he did in a Lightning uniform. And I think that's all Lightning fans, when they're trying to evaluate his season, or even Anthony Duclair's. That's all you could really go off of to give these guys a fair assessment. And so I'm going to give him a C. And so let me know in the comments below how you felt about his brief stint in Tampa Bay. And as for brief stints, will we be seeing more of him next season? We'll be talking about that. Will the Lightning bring him back to Tampa Bay? We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit. But first, we're going to talk about our first sponsor on today's show, and that is our friends over at eBay Motors. Now, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance: superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep a ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. So as always, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel there. If you want to follow more of my work, you could go over to boltbythebay.com. I actually published an article today discussing Connor Sherry, actually kind of just a follow-up to the podcast, that episode that we did yesterday, in which we did his player review on his season and talking about, the possibility of him being traded and all that stuff. So go ahead and check that out. So looking more into or looking past really his season, his very short stint, like I said, in Tampa Bay, only 18 games played in a Lightning uniform. Now, with him becoming a UFA, an unrestricted free agent, for those new to the term, really now what that means is that he could basically sign wherever he wants. And in years past, if you were to ask me if the Lightning had space and all this, if the Lightning were coming off like a very deep playoff run, I'd probably say, like, yes, let's do it. Let's give him another 1-year deal, throw him on the third line, help him, have him and Lilleberg play together. Absolutely, let's do it. But where the Lightning are in their situation right now in terms of cap space, roster situations, it's almost like the hockey gods in a way, or really if you want to kind of look at it from the fork in the road kind of situation for this Lightning franchise, there's two paths. To the left is kind of rebuilding and kind of conserving your picks while also trying to or continuing to attempt to contend for a cup. On the right-hand side, I think really it's kind of along the same thing, but you're more so investing in your minor league system, which mainly is Syracuse. And what I mean by that is that I think for the first time now in a very long time, I mean, you've seen it here and there bit by bit over the seasons, but really this season is going to be the first time, I believe, and I truly believe this is where the Lightning are going to be going, considering where it seems like everything is going. And all the talk going around certain players on this team, I think we're going to see the Lightning and give a little bit more time to their players in Syracuse, because I think they're at the point where they obviously don't have the money to go out there and get big time free agents or free agents that are going to help really to a certain degree where they can make a difference. And at the same time, they're also, I think, in the mindset, which I completely agree with. What's the point of drafting, putting time and money into developing these young players if they're never going to get a clean shot at the NHL? Because really that's what it's been for the last couple of seasons, really 4 or 5, has really been the fact that, the Lightning, rightfully so, have not given chances to some of the young players, A, because they weren't just ready at all, and B, because they were good. They were good. They were trying to contend for a cup, and most of the time when you're contending for a Stanley Cup title, you're not bringing up rookies unless they are top-notch rookie players that could come up and make an effect right away on this team, have an effect on this team right away. And they, for the most part, did not have that. They had that here and there. Nick Pervix, for a very short period, looked like he was that guy. wasn't the case. Alex Barre-Boulet, for a very short time, looked like he was going to be that guy. Here and there, yes, mostly in the playoffs. Ross Colton was that guy. He's now gone, traded away a couple of years ago. And I think that really, unfortunately, for Matt Dumba, and as much as I kind of criticize, not so much him, but I'm not a fan of his game, especially now where the Lightning are in, their journey, trying to stay competitive while trying not to deplete their assets. I think that really just Matt Dumba's in the wrong place at the wrong time. So unfortunately, when we're talking about what the Lightning are going to do next season and how Matt Dumba fits into those plans, unfortunately for Matt Dumba, I don't think he fits into those plans just because of the limitations that we saw from him last season. And it's unfortunate. Listen, whenever you trade for somebody and they're coming in on a expiring deal, I never, and I don't think anyone does this. If you do, then I don't understand the whole point of why you would root for a trade in the first place if you applaud it. But you want those guys to succeed and you want those guys to stick around, because at the end of the day, if you're getting picks, especially if you're getting a high pick that the Lightning got or potentially get at least in the 7th round, and then you get a guy that not only has a ton of NHL experience like Matt Dumba does, but at the same time, you could bring him back for cheap, which I don't think is going to happen. Then, I feel like it's a win-win. Now, the reason why I don't believe, besides from the fact that he won't come back because of just what we saw last year, the guy was making $3.9 million. And I don't, first of all, that's way too much money. It's definitely not in the equation for the Lightning, and it's definitely not something that the Lightning are going to be willing to dish out. Then again, if he wants to come back and he actually wants to play for a franchise that does have somewhat of a shot to win a cup for the first time in his career, because let's face it, no disrespect to other teams, but the fact remains, this is the best franchise that Matt Dumba has played for ever in his career. Minnesota, Arizona. I mean, Minnesota had some moments there during his time where the expectations were high, but as we all know, just from watching the playoffs every year, Minnesota just couldn't get the job done. And he goes to Arizona and takes a contract hit. He goes from $6 million to $3.9 million. Now, unless he comes back for the minimum, which I would be shocked. I would be shocked, if the Lightning brought him back, and also shocked if they brought him back on a very, very friendly deal for the Lightning. I wouldn't be shocked if they overpaid him. I wouldn't be shocked if they gave him Connor Sheary money. We are all aware of how careless Julien Brisebois could be at times with contracts, given just an ounce, or just his carelessness in general with the salary cap. I mean, listen, as great as the Ryan McDonagh trade was, his contract's insane. I mean, and last time I checked, you didn't get any retention in that contract whatsoever from Nashville. So we'll see. I mean, I don't think the chances, I think, are not even 1%. I think the chances of him coming back are, like, if I had to give him anything, 0.5%, which is really nothing. So let me know in the comments below. Do you want him back? Do you think he could still contribute? He's still very much in the swing of his career. I mean, he's not washed up by any stretch. He's still, he's not even, he doesn't turn 30 till July 25th. I mean, if you bring him back, his role should be nothing more than on the third line. But then now you kind of have two very one-dimensional defensemen in Cernak and then Dumba. So let me know in the comments below, what are your thoughts on that? Does it even make sense to bring him back? Do you bring him back kind of knowing, if you're the GM, that you have a deal worked out for Cernak and you could kind of maybe work your way around that? Let me know in the comments below, and coming up in just a little bit, we're going to talk about expectations. What does that mean for Dumba? Stick around and find out. But first, we're going to talk about our last sponsor on today's show, and that is our friends over at Ultimate Hockey GM. Now, hey, Locked On Lightning fans, I want to take a moment to bring up one of our partners, the mobile game Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? Do you think you could run the Lightning better than Julian Brees-Boss? Well, your dream could come true, and this game is most definitely for you. Manage every aspect of your team, play through the seasons, and lead them to glory. Hire the right coaches and staff, trade players or draft picks, navigate through free agency and the draft, all in this challenging and realistic game world. As a Lightning fan, you know there's no offseason. GMs are constantly making moves at every point of the year to improve their team's chances. That's why I think you are going to love this game. I've started playing this game. I am hooked on it, especially now we are in the middle, full swing at least for Lightning fans, of the offseason. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. By the way, Locked On NHL Network listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when they're using the promo code Locked On NHL in the game store, so make sure to check it out. Download the game visit hockeygm.app. That's hockeygm.app, or look it up on the app stores. Hockey GM, Ultimate Hockey GM. Start your dynasty today. So one last time, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel there. Hit that notification button so as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified. So real quick, and I know this is going to maybe seem a little bit of a wasteful segment, but we always talk at the end of player reviews. We always talk about expectations if the player were to come back. Now, having said that, and keeping in mind what I've said just recently on the last segment, just a couple of minutes ago, and saying that Matt Dumba is there's less than a 1% chance of him coming back. I'd be surprised if he comes back, and also not be surprised because Julian Brees-Boss just sometimes can go off the rails, back himself into a corner. But in this case, and it's nothing against him, I think he could be a very good player on another team and contribute in a different way. But where Matt Dumba is right now and what we saw from him really in his very brief tenure in Tampa Bay, it's not anything that I want to spend any amount of money on, that because I don't expect this guy whatsoever to go below $2 million on a contract. I don't. Like I said, he was just very one-dimensional, unless there was just something going on there where maybe it's going to take a lot longer for him to just get acclimated to the system and just the team in general. But in terms of expectations for next season, my expectation really is that he's not on this team. And I know that sounds a little harsh, but the harsh reality of it is that Julian Brees-Boss, even if he wanted to bring back Matt Dumba, should do the right thing and not bring back Matt Dumba. Because A, Matt Dumba did not contribute here. B, if Matt Dumba wants to get more money, it's not going to be in Tampa Bay. And I think Matt Dumba knows that. And if maybe call up Utah, see if they're interested. Stay with what you know. But my expectation is for that potential money that the Lightning could throw at him to be allocated to other parts of this roster to make them better, to make them and to develop their younger players from Syracuse, like all the players that we have talked about very consistently, on this podcast for the last probably month or so. So let me know in the comments below. I mean, we're going to be dropping an episode tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. Like I said, please go ahead, hit that notification button if you're listening to us on an app-based platform, just so as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified and you'll be able to listen to it. You can go ahead and follow us on our social media pages at LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. You can give me a follow on Twitter at DankyDank, DenkyD8NK. You could also follow my other work at boltsbythebay.com. Just put out an article not too long ago about Connor Sherry, just the continuation of the podcast episode that we did yesterday on his player review. So check that out. And we'll be back tomorrow talking about what you'll have to find out. So go ahead and tune in then. So that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.